What's going on, everyone? Today is October 25th of 2022, and welcome back to this edition of the Super Stream, a special edition today, as October 25th is the second solar eclipse of 2022. And we're going to talk a little bit about eclipses once again to start. Not necessarily only because I enjoy it, but partially also because the NFL seems to enjoy it as well. Last night's Monday Night Football game featured the Chicago Bears against the New England Patriots in what turned out to be an incredible riddle connected to this year's second eclipse. Now, back in April, I did a super stream on the date of the first eclipse. It happened to be the same day that Google had a Route 66 Google Doodle, and it was the 66th eclipse of that Saros cycle. So here we go again. On the eve of this year's eclipse, the big major sporting event in the United States finishes with the winning team scoring 33 points. This is a relatively rare score in the NFL, and roughly about 2% of all games in NFL history finish with one team scoring 33. So we'll talk about not only the score of the game, but how this was a big riddle connected to coach Bill Belichick, who was trying to pass George Halas on the all-time wins list in regular season and playoffs. However, he failed to do so, dropping his win percentage during the regular season to .666. And of course, triple sixes, 666, a huge eclipse number as well, as we will discuss. All right, so first of all, notice how the word eclipse in gematria sums to 33. And of course, just to introduce the language of gematria to anyone who may happen to be new, we start off with the alphabetic order, which is the most basic cipher, where each letter is numbered 1 through 26 relative to its position in the alphabet. The reduction or Pythagorean method then takes every double-digit number and reduces it to a single digit prior to adding it to the equation. And using that very significant method, the word eclipse has a value of 33, which again was the total of points the Bears scored in last night's game. Today's eclipse falls on October 25th, and when you write out October 25th eclipse, you also get this ordinal value of 303. Now, in numerology, zeros are typically ignored, so this represents the number 33. This game featured Bill Belichick trying to pass George Halas on the all-time wins list. And here's a look at George Halas, who was the original founder and longtime coach of the Chicago Bears. Halas' nickname was Papa Bear, which yields another 33. Now, typically, I only talk about total eclipses on this channel, with the occasional exception for annular eclipses. However, on the date of partial eclipses, there tends to be a very clear riddle, as there was with the Route 66 Google Doodle, in the media, and I'm sure this is just one of many. But this one was pretty obvious. So the big number of last night was 324. Bill Belichick was sitting at a total of 324 career wins, which happened to be the exact same amount as George Halas, the former owner of the Bears, who just so happened to be the team that the Patriots were playing last night. This alignment might not be too alarming, but consider that these teams are in opposite conferences, meaning they only play once every 4 years. So this is a highly unlikely thing to occur. Notice the Masonic pillars on either side of this image. This was taken directly from Monday Night Football last night. Usually when you see these pillars, this is a nod to the Eclipse Code and the Royal Arch of Freemasonry, which has a number of signs from the zodiac imprinted on it. But notice in particular the sun and moon on each side, with the 69 symbol in the middle. This representative of the sign of Cancer, which is ruled by the moon. You may recall how the moon landing was on the date July 20th, which is the first day of Cancer. I should say the last day of Cancer, whose ruler is the moon. And then when man came back to Earth, it was in the time of Leo, which is the sign ruled by the sun. Using the standard alphabetic order, the word eclipse sums to 69, the number directly at the middle of the sun and moon on this arch. Another highly significant cipher I teach in Gematria is called Latin, which used to be called Jewish Gematria on this channel. This is similar to the English standard method. These large number ciphers are built similarly to ancient Hebrew Gematria and Greek isopsephy. And in this Latin method, which I consider to be the most significant outside of the base 4 methods, notice how the name Belichick has this value of 69. Well, measuring from Bill Belichick's birthday to last night's game was a span of 6 months and 9 days. So what about the last total eclipse? Again, today is just a partial solar eclipse, which has relatively limited significance. Well, if you measure from the last total eclipse to the date of last night's game, notice how it was 324 days later, which is the number that they were showing you on screen just about all night. Notice how that eclipse fell on December 4th of last year, the date that we write 12/4 here in the United States. Today's eclipse belongs to Saros cycle 124, which are the same digits as the date December 4th. These digits 1, 2, 4 were also in the date of last night's game, 10/24, October 24th. Notice how when you write out the number 124, you get gematria of 66 and 60 in reduction. In fact, the number 124, when spelled out in ordinal, has the same value as 666. When you write out the number 33, notice how you also get values of 66 and 60 in the reverse method. Of course, the reverse ciphers in Gematria simply flip the alphabetic order backwards so that Z is 1, Y is 2, all the way through A is 26, with the reduction method working identically. And once again, after last night's game, the loss from the Patriots dropped Bill Belichick's career winning percentage to .666, or 66.6%. Now, the number 666 is highly significant to eclipses. In astronomy, the Earth's axial tilt is 66.6 degrees from the plane of the sun. We're told that the Earth is whipping around the sun at 66,600 miles per hour. This is a number coded into the magic square of the sun and the moon magic square. When you add sun-moon, you get a value of 666. Also, the number coded into the full name of NASA, the space agency tasked with exploring the sun and moon. So we saw how this is connected to the last total solar eclipse on planet Earth. Well, notice how when you write out total solar eclipse, you get this value of 104. In last night's football game, Mac Jones threw his 6th interception in just 4 starts, paving the way for backup quarterback number 4, Bailey Zappi, to take over. So with Mac Jones, number 10, giving way to number 4, this represents the number 104. Now, entering the game last night, the Patriots even had a 10-4 all-time record against the Bears. Now, if you measure between the birthday of these two men, Mac Jones and Bailey Zappi, you get 233 days. 233 is the ordinal value of 1331. which, as I describe in great detail in this post, is definitely the ultimate number connected to solar eclipses. In fact, when you write out Bill Belichick's full name, notice how you get this reverse value of 393? This is the only other number outside of 133 and 331 that has gematria of 1331, 393. 1331, the ultimate eclipse number. Switching gears away from the solar aspect, let's see how this game is connected to George Halas and his death in the year 1983. Once again, this guy's nickname was Papa Bear. In another significant cipher of gematria called Sumerian, which takes the alphabetic order and multiplies it by 6, which is the ultimate number connected to time, the name Papa Bear sums to 360. And it just so happened that last night was Bill Belichick's 360th game with the New England Patriots. He's won a total career total of 293 games in the regular season. And when you measure from his birthday to the death of George Halas, you get 293 days. Measuring from George Halas' death on Halloween of 83 to last night's game was exactly 2,034 weeks. That's a number that connects to the date, October 25th, which sums to 234 in the alphabetic order. Also in standard gematria, October 25th, 2,304. Notice how the name George Halas sums to 98, which is the reverse value of Patriots and New England Patriots. Also, 1331 equals 98. And I forgot to mention also that Bill Belichick has a playoff record of 31 and 13 currently. In gematria, the name George Halas sums to 199 in the reverse order. Tom Brady of the Patriots was drafted 199th overall. And the number 199 is a prime number, divisible only by 1 in itself. It's the 46th prime number. This game was against Chicago, which equals 46. Using the S exception, Patriots also equals 46. George Halas was 88 years old when he died. Notice how the name Bear sums to 88 in Latin gematria. Again, this guy was the founder and longtime coach of the Bears. And Bill Belichick had some fascinating numbers. You know, once again, 293 career wins. He was 293 days after his birthday when George Halas died. This is his 360th game with New England. The name Papa Bear equals 360. But notice how Bill Belichick has not only 440 regular season games coached, but also 44 postseason games coached. And 44 plus 44 is 88, which again was the age that Halas was when he died. Now, before I forget, the other man shown in this image on Monday Night Football was Don Shula, who was the all-time winningest head coach in the history of the NFL with 347 wins, a man that Bill Belichick may very well pass within the next year or two. Well, Don Shula died on May 4th, back in 2020. If you measure from his death to the date of last night's game, you get exactly 129 weeks. This number jumped out to me because 99 equals 129 in ordinal. 99 is the value of Patriot and New England. Last night saw the national introduction of Bailey Zappi And Bailey Zappi equals 118. So does Patriots. 118. Also 53 like Bailey Zappi. No doubt connected all around. All is a nod to today's eclipse. So once again, the Bears scored 33 points in last night's game. Notice how the ordinal value of 33 is 156. This is also a very significant number to eclipses. Eclipses always occur either 1, 5, or 6 lunar phases apart from one another. In the ancient Hebrew language, the word for eclipse, or obfuscation, I think I have to type out like full solar eclipse to get the right word here. Yeah, that's sun. This one is eclipse here. Well, I'm having a brain fart. I wonder if Google Translate is giving me a different value here. Okay, so it's this one. The word for eclipse. My apologies for being slow, as I sometimes am. But yeah, the word that translates to eclipse. Impairment, right? Or obfuscation, or blockage, a flaw, imperfection. This is the word that's used in the phrase for full solar eclipse. And in Hebrew, this sums to 156. Yesterday, I did this quick video after the names of the victims in the Hartland fire were released. Now, just a quick recap. Back on Friday, Rambo over at the Truth Codes uploaded a video about the heart and how it was connected to the big Ray Lewis Baltimore Ravens ritual back in 2000. And that same date, I had a synchronicity because I used to live in a village called Hartland. And in the subdivision I used to live in, there was a fire at an apartment building in which 6 people died that same very day. And on Saturday, I made a video talking about how this was connected to a classmate of mine, also from Hartland, who died in a plane crash. And on the same day as this fire, this past weekend, there was a plane crash in Keene, New Hampshire. Now, there also happened to be another plane crash in the news this past week. Businessman Rainer Schaller, who owned Gold's Gym as well as a number of other businesses, is believed to have been killed in a plane crash. And this was all connected to the death of the Red Bull CEO. We'll get into this story in a little bit, but again, this Hartland fire, I connected it to the NFL because that plane crash was at Dillon Hopkins Airport. And the previous 2 NFL games featured a Dustin Hopkins and a DeAndre Hopkins, 2 other men with the name D. Hopkins. Well, the Packers ended up losing to the Commanders from Washington, D.C. And Washington, D.C. is where the plane that crashed in 1998 that left Hartland was headed to. Number 23 for the Commanders. Remember, this was on the 23rd of the month. Even Aaron Rodgers had 23 completions in the day. But this all points to number 23 on the Commanders, whose name translates to Jesus. And his last name was McKissick, which connects to Hartland. You know, kisses for someone you love. Love, the heart. Similar symbolism. And then the name of the family that was killed in Hartland turned out to be McKissick. Spelled differently, but the way that they spell their name sums to 33. Also 515 like Jesus, which was also the date of the plane crash in 1998. So that may not have made a whole lot of sense in this context, but I urge you to check out my channel for my 2 videos on those incidents. Very bizarre things, and also a lot of personal synchronicity with this. And I'm actually going to get into this right now. I want to talk about this because I've been having so much synchronicity, especially since I launched this website. And sorry if this is a little disconnected. This is a little bit off script here, this part of the video. But I did want to mention this at some point. So shortly after I launched the website, which was on October 3rd, there was this car crash near downtown Milwaukee. And I believe this was on like the 9th. I can't remember the date of the article, or the date this happened. It was updated on the 17th, but again, it was like a week before that. Well, the man who ended up being killed in this crash was a pastor at Grace Lutheran Church. Now, the driver who killed him, it was a reckless driving incident at like 10 in the morning. And it turns out that the guy who hit him was on his way to jury duty. And I just got my first jury papers in the mail in like 15 years, just like a couple weeks ago. In fact, I had to delay it when I was launching the business, push it back to November. Now, the reason this is connected to me, Grace Lutheran Church, is because there's also a Grace Lutheran Academy in West Allis, near my house. And this Grace Christian Academy, and to be honest, I'm not actually 100% sure that this is connected to the Lutheran Academy. I'm pretty sure it is. Grace Lutheran, Grace Lutheran. This is Grace Christian, might be different. But anyway, it at least reminded me of my old school. I went to this building, but when I went to school there back in the early 90s, from kindergarten through 3rd grade, this school was called Jordan Lutheran School. And the name of this pastor who died was named Aaron. And I was like, what's going on? Because the quarterback of the Packers, who play football in Wisconsin, they're the NFL team that represents my city, his name is, of course, Aaron Rodgers, and his backup is named Jordan Love. So Aaron and Jordan. And we had this pastor named Aaron who works for an academy that overtook Jordan. And personally to me, this was just really bizarre. And again, this was a Lutheran school. And after I went to this school, I only went there from kindergarten through 3rd grade. And then after that, we moved out west. We lived in Pewaukee for a year, and then we moved to Hartland. And once I lived in Hartland, I started going to public school out there. So I was at a Christian school, but it was a very short amount of time. It was only like 4 or 5 years when I was really young. And I never made this connection, but we moved out to Hartland, and that's where I had my experience with Jesus, which I've talked about on this channel a lot before. And, this isn't a Christian channel. I don't center my work around that, but I do talk about my experiences. And Hartland is where that happened, where I accepted Jesus into my heart, which, looking back on it, is pretty funny. And I've always described it as a fire in my heart. And this fire in Hartland has been connected to, I've had all this synchronicity with it. And again, it reminds me of this Christian school that I went to, and then we had the death of this pastor. Again, apologies if that's a little disjointed, but it just gets wilder and wilder, doesn't it? I mean, I just made a video last month, not even a month ago, about these car crash synchronicities that I had with other gematria teachers on YouTube. And the stuff just blows my mind. And I saw a comment on my last channel that said, like, they're doing rituals around Derek because they know that he's onto them. And it's like, I mean, I get why people think that, but this stuff has been going on since way, way, way before I woke up. I'm talking about plane crashes from 1998. I had no inkling what was going on around me at the time. These things are happening anyway, okay? So, and I also believe that a lot of this is a lot more organic than some lead on, and that some people want to believe. Because I think there truly is a force, a hand hidden right behind the clouds that's pulling the strings to an extent. I mean, how could man really do all of this, right? Especially when it comes to our personal lives. So, again, that whole video on Hartland was connected to plane crashes, or the plane crash in New Hampshire in particular. And it just so happens that there was another large plane crash in the news on that same very date. So in Costa Rica, a plane crash is believed to have killed Rainer Schaller, who was the owner of Gold's Gym and a number of other companies. Schaller was a German entrepreneur. And this plane crash occurred the same day that an Austrian businessman named Dietrich Mateschitz, the founder of Red Bull, passed away. And these two are connected. First of all, consider how Rainer is German and Dietrich is Austrian. I believe it was my last super stream where I talked about a major connection to Adolf Hitler for next year's hybrid eclipse that's been in the news. The death of Micah Ben. That's where I talked about it. My video on Michael Benjamin. So here we are with, a German and an Austrian businessman dying on the same day. Of course, we're still in the midst of this World War III ongoing riddle with tensions of a nuclear exchange in the media. Notice how Mateschitz was 78 years old when he died, and he was allegedly ill for several years beforehand. Meanwhile, the name Schaller equals 78 in the alphabetic order, and he was the owner of Gold's Gym. Notice how Gold's equals 78. I thought it was interesting that this guy died in a plane crash on the same date, considering that Red Bull's slogan, which was this guy's company, is Red Bull gives you wings. In ordinal, Red Bull gives you wings sums to 269, which is a prime number. This would be the 57th prime number. Rainer Schaller died 57 years and 57 days after Gold's Gym was founded. And notice how Gold's equals 57 in the alphabetic order. 57 is a number connected to the moon, which has a 57-degree range of declination. And in ordinal, moon equals 57. Well, on the date he died, Dietrich Mateschitz was 970 moons old exactly. A moon being a lunar phase, roughly 29 and a half days. Why is the number 97 significant for these connected news stories? Well, the name Rainer, which equals 97 in reverse, died in a plane crash the same day. Plane crash equals 97. This is a number connected to death, 97. Once again, Rainer was the owner of Gold's Gym, and if you write out the word gold on its own, notice how you get gematria of 38 and 70. The date that his death made the news had a life lesson number of 38, and it also left 70 days on the calendar. Recall this was the same day as the fire in Hartland. Notice how fire equals 38, and fire equals 70 as well. Schaller died 74 days before his birthday, and they're actually saying this crash was on the 21st now, so this may actually be incorrect. 1/4 of 2023. Yeah, this doesn't line up anymore. But his death did make the news on a date with 74 numerology, which is the date that Dietrich Mateschitz died. And the number 74 really stood out here because Mateschitz was the founder of Red Bull. Red Bull summing to 74 ordinal, just like killing. Red Bull, killing, and plane crash, all with gematria of 43 as well. The numbers of sacrifice were present in this story. We start off with the Hebrew value of sacrifice, which is 347, matching 13 in Latin gematria. The founder of Red Bull died 13 days after Red Bull driver Max Verstappen clinched the Formula One championship. Notice how human sacrifice equals 130, ritual human sacrifice 103. And of course, Red Bull is an energy drink, which equals 130 and 1030. All numbers that represent 13. Now, Max Verstappen, his victory was the first for Red Bull Racing. Now, previously, this team was Honda. Verstappen won last year also, but it was under the Honda banner. This is the first year that Red Bull became the actual, manufacturer. So now it's Red Bull Powertrains. So this is the first time that Red Bull itself is going to win the Constructors' Cup. If I understand it correctly. I don't really follow Formula One. Now, more numbers of ritual human sacrifice would be 911 and 156. And in fact, 911 is the 156th prime number. Notice how the word plane equals 156. Mateschitz died 156 days after his birthday. You may recall that the number 33 equals 156. Well, 33 is the reduction value of Formula One. And consider how Max Verstappen, his full name sums to 303, and up until this year, he used to drive the number 33 car. This other businessman, Rainer Schaller, his name equals 33, and he was the owner of Gold's Gym, which equals 33 and 330. The number 33 has matching gematria with ritual human sacrifice, 895. And when you measure between the birthdays of Dietrich Mateschitz and Rainer Schaller, you get 8,995 days, the same exact digits. Regarding the 211 of ritual human sacrifice in Ordinal, Mateschitz died 211 days after his birthday. The phrase ritual sacrifice is 154. Rainer Schaller died in Costa Rica, 154. I also saw an interesting alignment in Rainer Schaller's age. So he was 28,644 days old when he died. And notice how the other businessman, Dietrich Mateschitz, his name equals 286. The word kill equals 28, 64, and 44. And then Costa Rica, where he died, equals 64 and 44. And Mateschitz was born in the year 44. So these digits being in his age, very odd. So let's talk a little bit more about Max Verstappen's Formula One championship victory. And here's another look at the winner, Max Verstappen, a Dutchman who has won his consecutive straight title. Second consecutive title. My bad. So what I thought was interesting is that Max Verstappen clinched this championship with 4 races left in the season, and it's been 11 years since someone did it that early. He clinched the championship on October 9th, which is the same date that Aaron Rodgers played in London. And you may recall, if you saw my video on this game, Rodgers was in London on John Lennon's 82nd birthday, and John Lennon's birth name equals 82 in reduction. Now, John Lennon always talked about love. He was a Libra, which is ruled by the planet Venus, the planet of love. And his relationship with Yoko Ono... Hang on, I need to drink a water, guys. Just one sec. A little too much caffeine for me today. So, John Lennon was often defined by his relationship with Yoko Ono in his later life. And here we have Aaron Rodgers talking about ayahuasca and self-love and how to love oneself and love one another. So this was a strong connection. Well, Yoko Ono was Japanese. And Max Verstappen clinched the Formula One championship at the Japanese Grand Prix. And notice how Japanese Grand Prix equals 97, just like Japanese. And Verstappen was born in the year 97. And now he's 25 years old. And 97 is the 25th prime number. Notice how the Beatles sums to 97 in the alphabetic order. With the S exception, so does Red Bull Powertrains, his new team. Verstappen is 25 years old. Yoko Ono equals 25. So does Lennon. And he clinched the title on a date with 25 numerology. Now, in the country of Japan, there used to exist something called the John Lennon Museum, which was opened on John Lennon's birthday, which, again, October 9th, the same date that Verstappen clinched the championship. Well, this museum closed on the date September 30th, and that stood out because September 30th is the birthday of Max Verstappen. This date is written 9/30, like the number 93. Verstappen's full name equals 93. This museum was in Japan, which equals 93, where he clinched. Yoko Ono, whose full name is Yoko Ono Lennon, her name equals 67. And she was 67 years old when she opened this museum. The 67th prime number is 331. The name Max equals 331. Red Bull equals 331. And when he won his first championship, he was driving the 33 car. When he won this year's championship, he was driving the number 1 car, 33 and then 1. Speaking of 33, Yoko Ono, who personally is my favorite singer of all time, she was born in the year 33. And she was 33 weeks after her birthday when Max Verstappen won the championship. Again, Verstappen's full name equals 303. And check out how old Verstappen was when the John Lennon Museum closed. He was exactly 156 months old. Again, that's the ordinal value of 33, which I think is the third time I've mentioned that in this video. If you measure from the closing of the John Lennon Museum to Verstappen's title, it was 12 years and 10 days, like the number 121. John Lennon equals 121. Was John Lennon a blood sacrifice? That equals 121. The John Lennon Museum was even in the Saitama prefecture. Notice how Saitama equals 64, 125, and 19. Those are the same values as Beatles. 64, 125, and 19. Speaking of 64, that's how old Yoko was when Max was born. Max equals 64. And a couple other connections as well. And again, this all happened the same day that our current present-day John Lennon, Aaron Rodgers, goes over to London. And I say that because of his connections with love, not because of his music, obviously. Football players don't tend to have the most musical ability from what I've seen. Another big news story from this past week was the resignation of Liz Truss from the role of British Prime Minister. Now, in my last Super Stream, I discussed at length Liz Truss's meeting with the Queen 2 days before the Queen died, and how that meeting was completely by the numbers. And Liz Truss even wore black to that meeting. It's as if she was playing the role of Death or the Grim Reaper. And if you look at the numbers, this completely played out as such. But this story, I want to talk a little bit more about her numbers and how they connect to the date that she resigned. So Liz Truss stepped down on October 20th. And check out the date numerology of October 20th this year. Notice how we get 36 and 72. And on top of that, October 20th also was the date that leaves 72 days in the year. Well, Liz Truss stepped down as head of the Conservative Party. Conservative equals 72. The name Liz Truss equals both 72 and 36, connecting to the date that she stepped down. The word resign also has gematria of 72 and 36 in both reduction methods. Liz Truss was well known for her support of Brexit, and Brexit was passed or finalized on a date with 72 and 36 numerology as well. But a big piece of this puzzle was that Liz Truss was just in her 45th day in office when she resigned, and this is the number that was all over the headlines, 45. The word resigned has double gematria of 45. Resigned equals 45 in reduction and 45 reverse reduction. With the S exception, the word resign on its own even equals 45. Her resignation must be approved by King Charles. King Charles has gematria of 273 in Latin. Check out check out King Charles' age on the date of Liz Truss's resignation, 27,003 days old. King Charles III has the same gematria as Liz Truss's full name, Mary Elizabeth Truss, 244 and 80. In fact, the name Liz Truss sums to the same as Charles Philip Arthur George, the king's full name. The king's full name also sums to 279 in ordinal. Liz Truss resigned 279 days before her next birthday. That date was also 340 days after Charles' birthday. The word resign sums to 340 using Fibonacci, also 222, like the year 2022. Liz's next birthday will be her 48th birthday. Charles III was born in the year 48, and he was also 48 weeks after his birthday. Liz Truss's resignation also fell on the 293rd day of the year. Now, the number 293 is the 62nd prime number. 62 is the ordinal value of Queen. And again, in my last super stream, I talked about how Liz's acceptance of the role was completely connected to the death of the Queen. Even the headline that CNN used gave us some very interesting numbers, particularly 320, which is the value of both Queen and Liz's full name. This all happened 320 days after the last total solar eclipse, and the number 320 has matching gematria with both Charles III and Queen. I wanted to quickly talk about some numerology in the NFL. Now, we've kicked off with the Bears and Patriots numerology, but there's a little bit more I wanted to uncover. From this past Thursday, in the game between the Cardinals and Saints. You could call the Cardinals and Saints the two Jesuit or Catholic-themed teams of the NFL. And I thought the fact that they were kicking off Week 7 in the NFL was pretty interesting. Now, if you add every number, 1 through 7, you get a sum of 28, which happens to also be the first or second perfect number. Perfect numbers are where the sum of divisors are double the number itself. So the number 7, strongly connected to 28. Well, to begin Week 7 in the NFL, we had Coach Cliff Kingsbury featured for the game, the head coach of the Cardinals. And his quarterback is named Kyler. Notice how both the names Cliff and Kyler sum to 28 in gematria. In fact, his name, Cliff Kingsbury, equals 208, and his full name, Cliff Timothy Kingsbury, equals 280. When he entered this game, he had 28 career losses, and if he won or tied, it would mean he also had 28 non-losses, because he also had one tie. And he did end up winning that game. This game was played against the New Orleans Saints, and notice how New Orleans Saints sums to 208 in the alphabetic order. The Saints, up to this game anyway, were led by Jameis Linnaeus Winston, and Jameis Linnaeus Winston equals 208. Remember, the Saints' last coach was Sean Patrick Payton, which also equals 208. And now the new Saints coach, his name is Dennis Allen, and Allen equals 28, and Allen was 28 days after his birthday for this game. And this goes further. Consider how the 28th prime number is 107. Well, using capital letters, Cardinals sums to 107. And the Cardinals in this game got their 587th franchise victory, which is the 107th prime number. So all of this jazz with the number 28 that I pointed out before the game, and then how many points do the Cardinals explode for in the first half? You guessed it, 28 points. Now at halftime, the Saints also had 14 points, meaning there were a total of 42 points on the board. That 42 popped up again later, when the Cardinals won the game with 42 points. Now, why is 42 so relevant to this game? This brings us back to the Eclipse code. Notice how the word Jesuit equals 42. These are the two Jesuit teams, right? The Catholic Church has Cardinals, which are the highest ranking members of the church under the Pope. And then Catholics beatify important people with sainthood. So the name Jesuit equals 42. With the S exception, so does the word eclipse. And I want to talk about why this is connected to the Eclipse code. To understand this, we need to look at Solar Saros 136. Solar Saros 136. If you want to know more about the Eclipse code or just some of the basics, we need to start here. I consider this to be the most important eclipse cycle of the entire canon. A Saros cycle is a cycle of repeating eclipses every 18 years and 11 days, or 223 lunar phases. This Saros cycle, 136, began in the year 1360, 136 and 136. When this eclipse occurred, it was still the 13th of June in the Western Hemisphere. So on the date 13/6 of 1360, in the Western Hemisphere, Solar Saros 136 began. Now, if you think that's a coincidence, I'm not sure how you made it this far into this video already, but I assure you it's not. Notice how the Jesuits equals 136. Well, let's bring up the Jesuits page. Notice how they were formed officially on September 27th of 1540. Well, September 27th of 1540 was just 3 days before an eclipse from Saros 136. Again, each of these separated by a little over 18 years. So this is very significant, and this eclipse cycle, 136, which also occurred in the year 1630, which I just noticed, but this cycle really picked up recently. First of all, we go to May 29th of 1919. This was JFK's second birthday. JFK would go on to die on the 44th anniversary of the other 1919 eclipse. Earlier I mentioned how the number 1331 is the ultimate eclipse number. Well, when you write out the number 1331, you get gematria of 1919. And Solar Saros 136 gives us an eclipse in the year 1919. This was the longest total eclipse in over 500 years. So this was a super significant eclipse. Then we fast forward a little bit and go to July 11th, 1991. This was the maximum eclipse for this Saros series, the only maximum eclipse in like 150 years it had been. So this was a major one. Then the next eclipse to occur from this Saros was in July 22nd of 2009. This eclipse passed directly over the city of Wuhan, China. And it was on the date July 22nd. Well, in Hebrew gematria, total eclipse equals 227, which is kind of how this date can be written internationally, 22/7. And of course, then we get the Wuhan coronavirus ritual. And remember, the vaccine was approved on December 14th of 2020. So we see here, December 14th of 2020, the FDA approves the COVID vaccine. Well, on December 14th of 2020, we had this total solar eclipse. And this total solar eclipse had its greatest eclipse over the nation of Argentina. Argentina is the home of Pope Francis, who is the first ever Jesuit pope. The Jesuits, who have this symbol of the sun and the atmosphere of the sun visible around it. Well, what's the name of the atmosphere of the sun? The corona. The sun's corona is the upper atmosphere of the sun, only visible during an eclipse. Now, the next eclipse to occur from Saros 136 is in the year 2027. So we go from the 22nd of July, 22/7, to 2027. Now, this eclipse occurs, I think the greatest eclipse is right over Luxor, Egypt. And this is the one that was connected to the big mass shooting across the street from the Luxor Hotel in Las Vegas. I think it was 9 years, 10 months, and 1 day apart. But this eclipse right here, belonging to Saros 136, this big Jesuit Saros series. Look at the date of this eclipse, August 2nd, or 2/8, the 2nd of August. And again, 28 is the number that was completely coded into this Jesuit-themed NFL game. So if you measure from the date of this NFL game to the date of this eclipse, this big Jesuit eclipse, let's see, this game was on October 20th, and that eclipse is on August 2nd. So first of all, notice how it's 286 days before the anniversary. New Orleans, Louisiana equals 286. That city is named after Orleans, which equals 286. New Orleans Saints equals 286 with capital letters. This game was a total of 1,747 days before the eclipse. Now that's the 272nd prime number. 272 is the value of 2022, the year that we're currently in. Remember, eclipse equals 222 in standard. But this 272 has the same digits as 227. New Orleans, Louisiana equals 227. Also 722 in prime numbers. Total solar eclipse equals 280 in Hebrew gematria, by the way. Which I would say is pretty important. Say full solar eclipse is the proper translation. And when you bring this to the Hebrew calculator, you'll see you get a value of 280, 28. And this is in the year 2027. And if you take out the word for solar, you get 227. Isn't that wild? This Jesuit eclipse from Saros 136 on the perfect eclipse date, 2/8/2027. And total solar eclipse is 280. And total eclipse is 227. It's just mind-blowing how well this is all orchestrated. And people think they're watching like real athletic competitions, and these games are literally stage shows. I still don't agree that every player is in on it, but I think several of them are, and especially the refs, and especially all the coordinators. You know, I'll tell anybody, like, if you give me a friend, or me and a friend, a chance to play Madden against one another, but we have to play only the coaches, I could set the game up so that we get the final score that we want with the computer players. You know what I mean? And I think they're doing the same thing in the NFL in a lot of these games. I could be wrong. There could be more into it than I know about, but I'm just looking at things from afar. So that's all I know about. One other news story that I got to cover since I put it on the thumbnail for this video was the death of Kevin Nash's son, Tristen. Kevin Nash is a professional wrestler, and he's best known for his time in what's called the New World Order in professional wrestling. So back in 1996, Kevin Nash and his best friend, Scott Hall, who recently died back in March of this year, joined forces with Hulk Hogan to create this stable called the New World Order. And again, Nash has already had tragedy happen to him this year with the death of Scott Hall. Well, after Scott Hall died, Kevin Nash started a podcast, and he began it with his son. I guess his son was helping produce it. The very first episode of this podcast was a memorial for his friend Scott Hall. In the debut episode, they talk about Scott Hall. So this whole podcast was essentially built on the passing of someone else. And now, just a couple months later, Kevin Nash's son dies, and now here they are remembering Tristen. Now I'm going to show you how this passing was completely by the numbers. There's a lot of speculation, again, on what killed him. I don't know what it was, but there's something more going into this than a lot of people believe. So I want to start off with the name Tristen Nash, which gives us a value of 563 in Latin. 563 is the 103rd prime number. This connects to his father, Kevin Nash, whose name sums to 103 in ordinal. On the date his death was announced, it was exactly 103 days after Kevin Nash's birthday. I pointed out earlier how ritual human sacrifice has gematria of 103, and we will look more at this phrase as we go. Not only did Tristen's death reach the media 103 days after Kevin Nash's birthday, but it was also 130 days after his own birthday. Once again, the phrase human sacrifice equals 130. Kevin Nash, before joining the New World Order, joined up with Scott Hall in a stable called the Outsiders. And notice how Outsiders also has this value of 130. And just last year, in the year 2021, the Outsiders were inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame. Notice how this also has gematria of 130. 13, a number of sacrifice, as I pointed out before. Well, the number 13 sums to 347, like sacrifice in Hebrew. This is the 69th prime number. Notice how the names Tristen Nash, New World Order, and Apple Podcasts all have gematria of 69. And assuming Tristen Nash died the day before this news story, which does seem to make sense, look how old Hulk Hogan would have been. Hulk Hogan was 69 years and 69 days old. Again, this is the man that the outsiders joined forces with to create the New World Order. The word sacrifice on its own has a reverse Sumerian value of October 20th, or 1020, I should say. But that's the date that this made headlines. The date was 116 days after Tristan's birthday. Wait, what was this? June 26th. That was the announcement, I think. Yeah, this is a mistake. This is when the podcast debuted, I believe. Or was announced, anyway. But never mind this anyway, because there's a much stronger connection with this death. Notice how the name Nash sums to 332 in trigonal gematria. This is an ordinal method that uses triangular numbers. The phrase blood sacrifice equals 332 in Latin gematria. And look how old Kevin Nash was when he had to announce the death of his son. Exactly 3,302 weeks old. The podcast that his son helped produce was called Click This. And notice how both Click This and Blood Sacrifice share gematria, 1541, in that cipher. Click This has the same gematria as Tristen in ordinal. Apple Podcasts is nearly a super match with Tristen Nash. Kevin Nash is a match with both Apple Inc. and Apple. And it should be no surprise that on the date of this announcement, Apple Inc.'s stock fell by 0.33%. See that it closed at 0.33% in the stock market. And again, that's because there was a sacrifice for Apple announced on this date. It's not hard to see when you know this language. I thought the name Tristen was a pretty interesting name here. The name Tristen means sad or sorrowful, and this was a very sad, sorrowful story. The name Tristen is actually traced back to Dristen, which is 101. And I only pointed this out because his death fell 101 days after the podcast premiered. And 101 is the 26th prime number, which was his age. And he died exactly 26 weeks before the next hybrid eclipse. I thought an eclipse was relevant because this guy was born on June 12th, or 6/12. And 6/12 is the verse of Revelation that mentions both a solar and lunar eclipse. There was also something else that I thought was odd, and I don't really know what this means, but it seems clear there's a connection, because Kevin Nash's middle name is Scott. And I thought that was really weird, because his best friend was named Scott Hall, the other half of the Outsiders, Razor Ramon. Well, Scott Hall's middle name was Oliver. And remember, Scott Hall died just like a week or two before Taylor Hawkins from the Foo Fighters. And Taylor Hawkins' first name was Oliver. His real first name, Oliver. Well, the other guy who hosts this podcast, Click This, his name is Sean Oliver. And I was like, wow, that's strange. Another Oliver. The name Sean Oliver has the same gematria as Tristen Nash and Apple Podcasts. This also connects to son, as it was Kevin's son who died. There was also a New World Order connection that lined up with Apple's founding. It's in that neighborhood of coincidence, but I don't know. I mean, this is a number we've been associated with New World Order for way too long. 174. All right, guys. Well, we've been running a little bit over an hour here. I think I'm going to go ahead and wrap this super stream up. Had a lot to talk about, a lot of NFL connections. Just really strange stuff with the fire in Hartland and the synchronicity I had with it. I just can't help but note how strange this is sometimes. You know, sometimes I do a lot of decoding, and I've certainly been doing more again lately. Of course, after we launched the website, there were a few weeks there where I was really working hard on getting the website to where I wanted it to be and where I was comfortable with it being. Right now, I think everything's working pretty well, pretty smoothly. So as a result, I've finally been doing as much decoding as I've liked, and you've seen this in the videos, you've seen this in the blog posts, especially. You know, getting back to where I wanted to be as far as level of production with content. There will be another phase of development in the near future. I think once the calendar turns to 2023, I'm going to start looking at phase 2 for the website and what that's all going to entail. The big thing I want to do is quizzes and little games that people can participate in and maybe even win prizes. That's something I definitely want to give back with. But yeah, you know, this whole thing with Hartland. So another level of synchronicity that I'm having with this that I just now realized is when I did this video on the car crash synchronicities that I was having, the thumbnail I used for that video, I made it a point to mimic the thumbnail I made back in 2020 when I was talking about that plane crash from the family in Hartland. So let me see if I can find this. Here it is. So here's the thumbnail for that other video. And I put the matrix code here. There's actually a different video that I had in mind as well. So maybe I'm making a little bit much of this. But every time I use this matrix code in a thumbnail, I end up having a strong synchronicity. The point I was getting at is that the more and more decoding I do, the more likely it seems to be that I'm going to find a news story that's highly connected to myself. And this is something that other people have approached me with. You know, I get a lot of emails from around the world, all walks of life, all levels of perceived insanity. And I would never call anybody crazy or insane. But there are times where I've been messaged by people who, you know, I wonder if they really fit that bill. But with that being said, the level between insanity and epiphany, perhaps, is very thin. And I'm very cognizant of that. And that's why I don't like signaling people out. Because we're all on our own paths. We're all on our own journey. But many people do email me from time to time talking about how, you know, they've been looking at this and how this news story was written for them and how they're after them. And this is a topic for its own video, I suppose. But I think the deeper you look at how numerology connects humanity, the more you realize it connects you to the greater good as well. And, you know, if you're a human being, which I believe all of you are, then you're going to be somehow connected to this web of humanity too. And sometimes it's freaky to see that. Somebody even commented on my last video, you know, don't be scared by this stuff. And I don't think anybody should be. I do have questions about who should all be hinted into this knowledge and whether or not it should be held back and kept for people who have proven themselves to be of a certain degree of awareness or physical, or I should say mental fitness. But then again, I don't want to be that judge. And nor would I want anyone else to be trusted with that judgment. So maybe the old Kabbalists had it right before. Either way, it's always fascinating, and that's why I continue to make these videos, and that's why I feel blessed to be able to continue making these videos. You know, once again, when I launched the website, I didn't just want to be another guy on Patreon, which I understand some, you know, people get flack for. That's kind of unfair to the creators because there's so many great creators on Patreon who deserve support and have done great things. But I wanted to make sure I had my own brand, so to speak. And that's what we accomplished with having gematronator.com online. Now, I think eventually I will have a Patreon just for people who are already on that platform and do want to support the work. That would be great. However, with the website going as it is, I'm not to where I need to be yet or to where I want to be, but I do believe we're on our way. I've spent 5-6 years building a following of sorts, and it's good to know that time wasn't wasted. So once again, to everyone who has joined on the website and supported the work, I can't thank you enough. The response has been really positive, and I look forward to doing this for a long time. The website's only going to get better and better. This stuff would never have happened had I not been able to quit my job and do this full time and build something that I was proud of. So the sky's the limit from here, and I'm very devoted to turning Gematria into the educational experience it really deserves to be. So once again, as the calendar turns into 2023, we'll get more focused on development once again, but until then, I want to do a little more content creation, engage a little bit more with the audience, which I've never been really good at. But as I do more videos, we'll do more Q&As, we'll find more things to open up to members of the website. Again, I don't want to hold anything back, since, everything that you could do before is still free on the calculator, and I don't want to change that. But I would look at making certain things available to members only. So I'm open to suggestions. There's a contact form on the website. My email is always listed at the end of these videos and whatnot. So feel free to check those out. But yeah, that's just about all I got for this video. So thanks to everybody, whether you're watching live or archived. Please feel free to smash that like button an odd number of times. And share it far and wide, as YouTube's algorithm no longer does favors in that regard. So with that said, peace, love, God bless, and we'll talk to you next time. See ya.